Morning here in Wisconsin and evening there in Germany, Patrick. And welcome wherever you guys are around the world. It is Monday, August 19th, and it's been a little over a week since the CrossFit Games for 2024 ended. And we've been relatively quiet on the YouTube. We haven't done anything on social media. We've done pretty little. I put a very little about on my personal Instagram, and we've been doing our best to kind of reshare the things that are happening in the CrossFit community in the wake of what happened at the CrossFit Games on our business account. And as part of this past week, it's been a big amount of reflection, a big amount of just putting things into perspective for a lot of people, and ourselves included in that. On Thursday morning, I put up a Q&A just as an opportunity to kind of check in with the community and see where people were at, and specifically, what did you guys want to know that you don't yet know about anything related to the CrossFit Games? And clearly, there was a competition of sorts that happened there, but there was, the passing of Lazar Đukić. That was a much bigger and deeper impact than anything that happened on the competition floor. And the questions that came in were more or less a reflection of that, where there was definitely some questions related to competition, but more than anything, the questions were with regards to what happened on Thursday morning of August 8th. Filtered through about 400 questions, whittled them down to, I don't know, somewhere around 60, and kind of categorized them into a variety of categories. We may have some guests joining us today. We put out some kind of soft invites to a few athletes to see if they'd have any interest in coming on and offering some perspective, given the nature of some of the questions, and the fact that obviously they can speak to a different experience at the games than anyone else. So if they happen to join us, we may kind of deviate from what we're talking about, or just wrap up the thing that we're talking about and shift topics a little bit. But at some point today, we are also going to talk about what is kind of the future or the near future course for B.Friendly Fitness. We may start with that unless the athletes happen to join. I thought kind of the coolest thing about the Q&A that I put out there was that the most frequently asked questions was about how we were doing. And so I think we're just going to start with that. And, Patrick, maybe I'll let you, speak first to that. You were obviously in Germany during the CrossFit Games and have a ton of people at the games that you care immensely about. You're a very giving person in general, and I know it was hard for you to not be there prior to any of these things happening, and then to have to deal with that distance on top of the complexity and sadness of the weekend. And it's been about 10 days since then. So how's the last 10 days been from Germany for PC?
Yeah, I think you brought up a couple of good points. One was, I have a lot of connection with everyone there. Obviously, with athletes, friends, stuff like that. But I think I also have a different perspective from people that were there, like yourself, where I think I have the perspective of a lot of other people that watched the games, because I was watching the games, just like everyone else. I was on my phone trying to get information, soaking up podcasts, trying to listen to who was putting out stuff, and of course talking to you. So it's kind of weird. So how am I? I think when we talk to a lot of people, I think my question is I'm managing, just a lot of things. Obviously, when the games happened, it was right in the midst of me deploying for 9 months, 10 months to Germany, to Europe, while at the same time, I have an athlete competing that has become someone that was going to be a teammate of Lazar's, who knows Lazar very well, had an interaction with Lazar, and just helping her out in the process. Luckily, and we'll probably talk about her later on, is Jamie, who was not only helping us out, but also helping out Sahara on my behalf. But she will probably bring up her post where she will probably talk about, she has a very unique perspective that she was able to share with a lot of people that neither one of us were a part of. She was in that meeting for 3-4 hours with the athletes, with the coaches, with representatives. So I was really dealing. It was something that she didn't sign on to do, but she ended up being a big part of what happened this weekend. And obviously, I was really trying to help her because there was a lot for her to deal with, just like everyone else. When I was on the phone. Thank you, Sarah. Yeah, she did. Not very she's not very pleased with it, but I told her, it wasn't about the result, and she understands that. And I'm proud of her. I'm proud of all those athletes. There's so many perspectives of whether competing or not. Whether there's no right answers to that. There's no wrong answers. She chose the ladder based on what she felt Lazar would want her to do. And but how I'm doing overall, I'm like I said, I'm coping, I'm managing. I don't think it's really hit me yet. I think it will when we go to a competition where I'm live at a competition. There's some type of remembrance or memorial, because I wasn't able to be there for you, Brian, or be there for the memorial, either one of them, the one that CrossFit had and the one you did. I think that's when it's going to happen, where it's really going to probably hit me again. I do find myself being a little bit more emotional a lot the last couple of days because there's been other circumstances. But yeah, I'm coping. So that's the answer. How about you, Brian? How are you?
Yeah, I mean, so to address that, a few other people asked the question that I think is kind of relevant for that, which is, why did I leave the CrossFit Games on Saturday during the games? And it was a culmination of a few things. The unique circumstances of this event was everybody that was there had a variety of different information. And, for whatever reason, Luca decided to talk to me on Friday morning. And so I was able to hear him explain some things that not everyone was able to hear. And as part of doing that, he said, hey, I'm telling you this because of how close you were with Lazar and with me, and that I think he would want you to know, but you have to respect that this is my information. This is my story, and I will tell it when I'm ready. Which is, I'm grateful to have had the chance to hear that from him, but it's also, it makes it strange to be walking around and talking to people who didn't have the opportunity to talk to him at that time. Additionally, I sought out some solace, I guess, some comfort with people who I would consider friends and mentors in the CrossFit space that were in Fort Worth at that time, specifically on Thursday. And I was again privy to some conversations that I don't think that most people would be or are yet aware of. And, with the nature of everything that's going on right now, I still don't think that it's good for me or appropriate for me to necessarily share that information because it's not confirmed, but it did seem credible. And then, on top of that, I just have to deal with my own emotions and the way that I handle things as everyone else does. And the combination of these things made it difficult for me on Saturday being there. And I felt like it was going to be best for me personally, and for, everyone that I was interacting with if I just left. And it's a big decision for me to leave. I think I have about 36 CrossFit competitions on the books this year. You can't just do that if you don't really love being there, if you don't really love and appreciate the athletes and the competition, and to step away from the pinnacle event of the year in the middle of it, especially when people who, I do have some really great relationships, were also still out there competing, and some of them were doing quite well and did quite well. But in a moment like that, it's selfish, maybe it's responsible, is to do what I think that I needed to do for me, which leads to this question we're talking about of how am I? I decided to switch my plane ticket from going back to Charlotte, where I live by myself, to coming to Chicago and Wisconsin area, where I have some friends and family here. And that's been the best choice. That was really the best choice, was me doing that, because from this location, I feel loved and supported. I feel the ability to still tap into what's going on with the CrossFit space. I've been able to keep up with what I want to keep up with in terms of what's going on online. And then when I don't want to be a part of that, I don't have to go to the gym and coach and answer questions. I don't have to be surrounded by other people who are at the games. I'm just here, and I can go and play with my friends' kids or go for a run in the neighborhoods and just kind of be at peace and deal with that stuff on my own. And that's been extremely refreshing for me in terms of evaluating personally where I'm at and where I want to go next. I mentioned that some of the people that I have a good relationship had really good performances at the CrossFit Games, and we're pretty grateful that one of them has taken the time to join us this morning.
Hey, good morning, gentlemen.
You like that transition there, James?
That was beautiful, dude. I can tell you're a pro, bro. I can tell that you do this often. You come here often, bro?
James
How are you
Sprague.
guys? Hey.
We're good, and if you want to know how we are, you can go back and listen to the last 10 minutes of the show, because we're doing a kind of a Q&A today, as you know, and the first question that we chose to answer was that question because it was the most frequently asked question, which I think is it's a really kind of a positive thing. I mean, everybody has questions about what's happened the last 10 days, but the kind of resounding feeling that I've had from everyone in this space is that they're caring for each other, that people are reaching 100%. Out and checking in on each other. And so, James, we'll just let you kind of pick up where we left off, after leaving for Fort Worth. How has the last week been for you?
It took about, I would say, 4 or 5 days for me to feel anything like any bit of like pure joy. I think there was moments after the win where it was like, oh my gosh, this is surreal. Like this just doesn't feel like the real world. I still feel like I'm dreaming. But about, I would say Thursday or Friday after was where I started to feel like, man, like still freaking sucks the way it happened, and it's devastating, and it breaks my heart. But I started to feel like, wow, it's actually setting in that I earned this kind of thing. On the other side of it, it still feels like we have no answers, and we feel like as athletes, like what is the next step? And I feel like they're going to be very slow about the next steps, which is kind of a bummer because I think everyone wants answers now. I think everyone wants to know things now. And that's just human nature. But I would say for me, my heart's in a much better spot. I feel like I'm back in my routine with good people that are able to not distractions from everything, but more just like they're my feel good people. I feel good at being around them. I'm comforted. My fiance, my best friends are here. I have just my favorite environment. The sun shines out. I got all the golf.
All right. got a little excited there.
Oh, was that me?
Yeah, that was you.
Oh no! What the heck? I didn't even click a button. But anyway, I think
we would never cut you off when you're talking about your fiance and golf.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Thank you. Anyway, I've been able to really just like, I don't know, escape CrossFit and everything mentally from the week, good or bad. And this last week, I think it's really healthy to step away, and I will continue stepping away for another week.
Yeah, and I think, and that's similar to what I was saying there, is to be in an environment where you're around loved ones and you do have the opportunity to kind of withdraw and do those things that you love. Spend some time with the significant other. Go and play. I think you said you played 5 rounds of golf this week.
Yeah, dude.
That's
6
amazing.
as of yesterday.
And I've done similarly. My brother came up for a few days. We played some disc golf and just put ourselves in environments where we could. It's like you said. It's not ignoring. It's just doing the things that we love and giving ourselves an opportunity. Sometimes you need to step out of a situation in order to gain an enhanced appreciation of what it is or what it's going on or what it means for you.
Totally. When I go back and I watch the games, I've watched a couple of little things, but it's hard for me to associate myself with the James I see on screen. I'm like, whoa, I actually just did that amidst all that. Like, I look at that guy on the screen. I'm like, oh, that's me. Like, I know that sounds so weird, but it hasn't
You know,
like
well, do you know who else said that?
who.
Lazar.
Re-
I don't know if you watched the Mayhem, like the 5-minute thing they put, but one of the things
Oh,
in
wow.
there, he's like, that guy up there is my alter ego. Like
Mhm.
I sometimes struggle to believe that that's me.
Yeah, like we do such incredible things that when we actually start to relax and watch what we do, we're mesmerized by it. So we can't comprehend us actually doing that. Like when we're training so hard and in this rut routine, we expect these things out of ourselves. We expect 275 snatches every day in training. We expect 5-minute miles. We expect all these great things from ourselves. But then we actually relax and we're like, whoa, I couldn't imagine doing that right now. We can't comprehend how that could actually be us. So it's just super weird disassociation.
James, prior to the games, you and I had talked, and you'd guaranteed an event win, and we had a little bet, but you didn't win. You didn't win. You didn't win the event that you guaranteed, but you did win the CrossFit Games. So I think I probably still owe you a fulfillment of this bet.
Where are you putting it?
Well, we made a deal. At some point, probably the next
Okay.
time I know I'm going to see you.
It's
I'll
got to be
sport.
it's got to be at an event.
Yes.
Okay.
So
I
that's what I will owe you for your achievement that weekend.
love it. I think me and you both know where we're gonna see each other next. But I just don't know if I can say that yet. But so
No.
probably then.
You can't say it. I can't say it.
I won't say it yet.
Yeah.
James, we spoke on the phone. I think it was yesterday or the day before, and I asked you a question, and I got this question asked a bunch of times, and I thought that the way you handled it with me was great. So if you don't mind, if I ask it to you again,
Yep.
it's are you the fittest man on earth?
It depends on what gender I am. If I'm a man, yes, I'm the fittest man on earth. Yeah, actually though, how I answered it with you the other day was I think a lot of people have been debating this question, and I love that it's a big talk because I think that people don't people want a surprise, but people want a surprise under their circumstances. People want a what they want, and I don't think anyone wanted. I mean, wanted's the wrong word. I don't think anyone predicted me to be in the top. I think 0 people put me in first on the Heat One app.
You
Like,
didn't even put yourself in first.
no, I
What?
didn't. Like, yeah. So here's the thing. There's always something or some circumstance that happens each year, right? Last year, Roman getting hurt, so Adler won because of that, right? Adler was the fittest man on earth. Justin being there without Matt Frazier. Was Justin not the fittest man on earth because Matt Frazier didn't show up? No, we consider him the fittest man on earth. There's so many things that people will try and take you down with, and there's so many things that people have commented and tried to say this, and this, and I'm like, nah, dude, I worked really hard for that, and for you to try and take that away is kind of a bummer. But it doesn't bring me down. I'm just saying, hey, if you saw all the work that I put in this year, maybe you'd change your mind. Maybe you'd see all the blood, sweat, and tears that went into this year and say, wow, maybe I'm kind of dumb for saying that. But if you want to believe that I didn't win the CrossFit Games because of I didn't mentally have a struggle this weekend, you're completely wrong. It was a very hard, challenging mental weekend that, quite frankly, I didn't know if I was going to continue Friday morning either when the things came out that we're going to compete. And I knew that for me, my reasons for competing were honoring him with my gifts and going hard on the floor to, show what I said in my favorite Bible verse: "Righteous man falls 7 times, yet he rises again." And like I said, when Luke Parker told me that Lazar was a man of faith, I knew that that's what I felt called to do. And so I competed for that. I also competed because I'm about to get married, and me and my fiance are gonna move into a home. I need to get a new car, and this is my means of making money for my year. And so there was a lot of things that prompted me to compete and push. And I had so much family there and friends that sacrificed so much to be there and support me. I wanted to do it for them too. Um, so I went out there and I put on the best show that I possibly could. And I put every ounce of effort into each event. Um, So yeah, that's how I feel about the win, and I think I am the fittest man on earth, and I believe that.
I've always thought like the title. I mean, the fittest on earth. Obviously, that's a trademark thing by CrossFit,
Yeah.
and you know, whoever wins the CrossFit Games is deemed that based on
Totally.
legally through CrossFit.
Totally.
But I always gave the argument that you know, you're the fittest man on earth because you were first at the completion of that test and variation of that test. Now, did that test truly test fitness from an overall standpoint? In my opinion, it does. It does. But it's like, you know, the CrossFit Games, if someone programmed all swimming events for the CrossFit Games, no one would do it. And that person won the CrossFit Games, would you, you know, and he won, you know, by winning the CrossFit Games, you are de facto the fittest on earth. Does that make that person indeed the fittest on earth if it was all swimming? I mean, in terms of,
I think people are trying to say that the 10 events we did still weren't well-rounded enough. Where in reality, it's
you're
like,
2 events short. 2 events.
Yeah, like we're 2 events short, but when we look at it, like, what did we really miss? We missed I think the thing we missed was not Amanda. I think the thing that we missed was the unknowable kind of test that no one knows how you're going to do in this. The tire hammer, like that, like the ability to adapt to a very new stimulus was missed. And I can tell people this, that if you want to say like, oh, those 2 events weren't good for James, whatnot, I felt as if those were 2 great events for me, and then I would have loved to compete in them. And so, like, yeah, we fell 2 events short. I guess you'll never know.
Well, it's, you know, the interesting thing about the conversation is that the history of the CrossFit Games is a bit volatile, right? In 2019, you had this huge field, but most of them got to do 3 events or less, and only 10 people got to do the last half of the competition. In 2020, you had to be good online just to get a chance to compete in person, and only a small percentage of people even had a chance to do that, and some who thought that they did earlier in the year didn't. And then you've referenced some of these other things, and yes, all of these variables are unique and different, and so is this. But when I look at what happened at the CrossFit Games this year, I try to think about it in 2 regards, and one is, you know, we were building up the men's field in the CrossFit Games to be the most compelling and competitive event or slate of group of men that we've seen yet, where we didn't really know who could win, and people were throwing 4, 5, 6 names out there, and then there was another 4, 5, 6 names that people were saying maybe these guys could podium. And always in the back of the conversation is this concept that we know there's going to be someone that we rank 20th, 30th, 35th, whatever, that just outperforms. And that, how good does outperforming mean? I mean, this is somewhat unique, but not entirely unprecedented. BKG in his first year at the Games was 25th or 26th, and he was 3rd the following year. So we've seen someone do something similar to what you've done and make a jump from the mid-20s to a podium. It wasn't a win, but it was similar. What I really get excited about looking forward when it comes to whenever we see the best athletes in the world compete again together is that flashback to last year's CrossFit Games, we had Adler win. You go to Rogue, you had Vellner win. You go to Dubai and Roman won. You go to Wadapalooza and Ricky won. You look at the semifinals and you see how competitive it was there. And by the way, you were in the mix at the semifinals. It's not like it was like you snuck in on a last spot before you took this win at the Games. And now we have winners from these semifinal events, and then we go to the Games and we have yet another new winner. And so I want to kind of filter this into another question that we got some versions of, which is it possible to both mourn and move forward at the same time? And James, I think I'll let you run with that one as you want. I've kind of teed up the fact that whenever competition does pick up again with some of the best in the world, it's just as exciting, if not more so, the group of men that could potentially be in any of those fields than it was prior to the Games, with the success that you had, the return to success that Jason had, Dallin improving on a 5th place performance, Brent Fikowski once again doing something that really no one was picking him to be even in the top 3 this year. And then there was this huge slate of guys behind him, the Quants, Maderos, Vellners, that are all still lurking. Yellow Hoste was good. So in light of the competition scene and the tragedy that we all had to endure, what do you think about this concept of both mourning and moving forward with life?
Yeah. So it comes down to like how much time do you need? Like there's no right or wrong answer for anyone, and it's also very dependent on your relationship with him. A family member and friend might mourn for years, and that is completely okay, and they might take years to move on and do life normally, and that is completely okay. um and I think for people that like myself who knew him and were around him um and maybe didn't have the most personal relationship, I think the deal is that you know I'm still feeling it, and I'm going to continue to still feel it, but not use it as fuel to keep going, but rather use it as a reminder of, this can end any day. This sport is, and any sport is dangerous, and your career can end any day in any way. I could drop a snatch bar on my head and be paralyzed tomorrow.
Oh, okay,
Um,
let me say that. Come on.
I'm just trying to say that
I know.
tomorrow's never promised.
Hmm.
So live out today fully. And so for me, when I get back into training, sure, I'm going to be feeling sad some days. I'm going to feel, why the heck did that have to happen? Why did we lose a brother? But I I don't want to slow down, because that any day could be the end of my career too. So I want to make sure that I live this life to the maximum each day that I have, because tomorrow's never promised. So yes, you can continue to push strides forward in what you're doing, and continue to mourn and grieve through that in unison. Um, because I believe that if we just sit in silence and don't move forward with our lives and keep living our lives like that, I can't speak on Lazar's behalf, but I can't think that that's what he'd want us to do. I can't think that he'd want us to sit here and just not continue pushing greatness forward in this world and in this sport and in our community. Um, so my answer is live today like it's your last.
Romeo puts a question here that I really like, and it's a little bit in alignment of something you and I also spoke about this week, James. You obviously took the top spot. Dallin was right there behind you, and Dallin clearly has been a friend and competitor of yours pretty much since your introduction to the sport of fitness. And then we had Brent, we had Jason right there. And when you and I were talking, we were saying like, Brent's 33, pushing 34. The other three of you guys are averaging 10 years younger than him. And so, obviously you can speak about how special that moment was with Dallin, but also maybe flow it into they had the movie a couple years ago about the new generation coming up, but it feels
Yeah.
like it's definitely here now.
Totally. It is really cool, man. Like me and Dallin have had a special relationship. You know, before he got married, we basically did everything together. Like I was in Utah all the time. He came over to my place a lot. We did a lot of life together. And even though he's still married now, like we check in a lot. We're still brothers. He's a groomsman in my wedding. Special man to me. And so just like realizing like where it all started, and then standing there with him after was like, holy crap, we did it. Like it was right after that 10th event. Like I think I laid down on his thigh and I was like, bro,
Yeah.
what just happened? Like this is everything we've ever dreamed of. Maybe not in the sense we imagine it being, under like how we'd compete with everything that happened. But like, dude, we set out to do something daring and we achieved it. And I know that he may have fallen short a little bit of his goal, and that might hurt a little bit. But I also think he sees the improvement, how far he's come. Like he crushed some running workouts, man. He did. He's closing the gap on things he's bad at, just like me closing the gap on things I'm bad at. A thruster pull up workout. We're both continuing to push the limits of what's possible together, and it's just the start of it. It's just the start of it. We got 10 to 12 more years of this together. God willing, we stay healthy and get to do all 10, 12 of them, maybe even more. But I think that's an exciting thing for the sport, is that you just saw two guys who are just starting be up there.
I just got to follow up on what you said about his improvement. I did actually speak to him at some point on the weekend, and he clocked the 5K time on that opening run of the first event 90 seconds faster than the same distance from the previous year at the games. So that's what a year's worth of work looks like for an elite athlete when they're focusing on something specific.
And it may not have shown to people on the leaderboard that see, oh, Dallin took a 15th in the run swim and a 22nd on the track event. But man, compared to what that was last year, is very beautiful, and I'm proud of him. It's really cool.
Hey, keeping it real says that on a podcast, Dallin mentioned some story about you turning to them on Sunday morning and telling them you're going to win the games. Any validation to this?
No, it was a question. He wasn't telling him; he was questioning.
Yeah, I was making a joke because it was so far-fetched. Like, Jason was like, dude, if you wear that leader jersey before me, I'm going to kill you. And I was like, and so when I got it, I kind of teabagged him and put it in his face as a joke. We have a very big jokey relationship, the three of us, I would say. And I think a lot of the guys are lighthearted like that too, but specifically the three of us. And so I turned to Jason after the dumbbell snatch run was announced. We were saying to each other at the briefing. I was like, bro, am I gonna win the games? Question mark? Like, as like a joke. And because I was like, oh, that's a home run hit workout. Like, I should top 3 this. And I did. So I was like, oh, this is great news. Like, but there's still probably a couple more things to be announced. Like, something weak's gonna come out. And when the thruster pull-up workout came out and the yoke, I was like, dang it. Like, almost got the perfect set of workouts. But that's why I'm just as shocked as other people are, because that, like, I've told so many people this, like, that workout shouldn't have gone that well. I just paced it perfectly for who I was and my abilities, and I think that knowing where your body is at that point of the weekend and how to approach workouts based on where your body is at is a crucial role of doing well on day 4. Crucial. And you have to consider all these factors with your pacing and your strategy. And I think I did that better than most guys, and that's why I was stood up there.
One of the things that you and I spoke about, I think, in Texas was that within workouts, you feel that you have some advantage in a pacing element. And people got to see that specifically on display during Chad. But, whether it's in a workout or the weekend, this is a concept that if you want to be elite at CrossFit, you have to understand is how to get better when everyone else is getting worse.
Totally. Yeah, pacing is our sport, right? There's very few workouts that are just like, don't think, just go. Like, even Chad, you could look at that workout and be like, oh, you just have to keep stepping over a box. Don't think, just go. But no, there's so much pacing and strategy and mindset that goes into a workout, even as simple as that. Like, I think of 2 workouts at the games this year where there was pretty much zero strategy. It was a sandbag run workout, and it was the first part of the 2 thruster workouts where it's just like, you cannot think, you just have to do the work fast.
I want to ask you about that sandbag run.
Because
I actually did see something that I noticed over the course of the heats, which was in every heat, it seemed like there were 1 or 2 athletes that passed 2 to 4 athletes on the last sprint, almost like they were just lurking a step or 2 behind and saving a little energy for a finishing burst on the last 100 meters.
Yeah, man. I took the opposite approach. I took the opposite approach to get as far out in front because I don't have the sprinting legs. So if you have the sprinting legs, you should do that. Like Ricky, Ricky's just an overall good runner.
Overall runner.
Yeah, but if you are a sprinter, like, and you're like, okay, I'm the fast twitch guy, that's how you should approach that. And I think you saw guys do that. And so my strategy was opposite. I'm just gonna stay in a powerful 95% run the whole time and just give all I got at the end. So yeah, I guess you could say there's a little bit of strategy into that, but for the most part, it was just turn and burn.
Hey, I want to kind of go back to that first event. We've heard some athletes' accounts talk about how difficult, the event itself to them was. And we had a question that was sent to Brian, but we wanted to share it with you. what do we know about other athletes' experiences of water during an event? What was your experience with the water? We heard Dallin. Dallin said that, he couldn't see. It was murky, it was foggy, hazy. He luckily had like a reference point, that some trees as a reference point. I mean, how was your experience in the water?
Oh, I have some stories to share that I haven't publicly shared yet. My first story being that I thought a random pedestrian hit me in the water, and it was actually Jeff Adler. So I was swimming toward the end. I was about
Mm-hmm.
halfway there, and a random person comes perpendicular to me and smacks me in the face. That's super hard. Like it knocked me, dude. It didn't feel good. And I get up. I'm like bobbling. I'm like, who just hit me? And I look and it's this guy swimming across me, completely wrong direction.
Yeah.
And I didn't realize at the time that it was Jeff. And I thought, and I yelled, "Are you okay?" And he didn't respond. Like he wasn't hearing. He was just backstroking. So this guy was either just couldn't hear me because his swim cap was on too tight or incoherent, right? And so I didn't realize that till about 2 hours after the event when everyone's like, Jeff was swimming the wrong way. And then I realized it. I was like, I saw this figure. It looked like kind of a fit man, but no one would be swimming in the wrong direction, right? It's the CrossFit Games. Like, why would you be swimming? He was swimming the complete wrong way. So that was my first experience and take was how weird that was that I got smacked in the head by Jeff. Second thing was I actually PR'd my 5K by about 40 seconds as well. And when I hit my PR 5K was when I was a skinny runner. So I ran so hard on that first part. And I think that's what competition does to you,
Dude, I don't think people appreciate that because I was even watching. I was like, wow, Jeff and Ricky are just killing this and everyone else is running slow. But everyone was actually running fast. They were just running that much faster.
Dude, it was wild how fast. So I was in the group with Tia. We averaged, I think, 605 miles for the 3.5. And my old PR was around 615, 618s.
Wow.
And so, like, it was just wild to be like, what the heck? Like, finish that run, like, off this adrenaline high. But I was so freaking hot getting in that water that getting that water, like, was the grossest feeling. You're like, ugh, like, ugh, so hot. Like, no sense of cooling refreshment at all, but rather a sense of, like, sweaty heat grossness. And so, like, I was, my goal was to stay with Brent on the swim because I knew we we're both good swimmers. And my energy was immediately depleted getting in that water. It was like right when I got in within the first minute, it was like, whoa, this is an out of body experience. I'm way too warm. What's happening? For reference, I'm a state swimmer. I used to swim at a state level for Washington State. I was very proficient in the 100 and 200 freestyle. Like those were my races. So I'm very comfortable in the water. I'm comfortable pushing high heart rates in the water too. And for me, that was the most difficult swimming thing I've ever done, ever. And I swam a lot.
Which is not a unique account. I've spoken with other athletes that at the games and also since then that have said similarly, and they're also athletes who I would consider in the top, 10% of all swimmers at the games.
Yeah. And when I had to breaststroke a lot because it was for my safety. I was like, I can't stay under this water. I can't swim regularly. And for most of you guys hearing this, if you don't know, the best CrossFit athletes don't ever breaststroke. That's not a thing. We don't like go to breaststroke. Like it's not like we're comfortable going. I can go 30, 40 minutes freestyling, no problem without a breaststroke. And so it was too hot and I couldn't see, just like Dallin. I think every one of us hated those goggles, did not feel good. They were too dark and I think the water was too dark and I don't think there was enough sighting. And so I just tried to look for the shoreline because I knew there was like a shoreline. So I kept looking for that. And I actually, for my own safety, when I got to that shoreline, I stood up for a second and took a break because I was like, man, this doesn't feel right. So I stood up, took a break, and it was on this.
Any idea how far into the swim that was?
Yeah, so there was you remember that that final yellow buoy that was the final turn?
Dallin said he turned in there thinking it was
the
final.
Yep.
Yeah, and then there was about a 300-meter sprint left after that. So it wasn't like you were almost done
So
at
just
that.
past the halfway point of the swim.
Mm-hmm.
Like, so actually, the swim clocked in 0.88 on my watch and I was pretty close to the buoys the whole time. So that was the biggest bummer, was not being briefed on how long the swim was accurately.
Well, and because they didn't mandate keeping the buoys on one side or the other, I'm
Yeah.
sure that there's people that swam more and less distance than that too.
Yes, but even though I swam in a straight line, I didn't
So that
deviate
might have
too
been
much.
as close to the most efficient path.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And clocking in 0.88, like that is like, even if I swam in the perfect straight line, I may have got 0.82, 0.85, but that was not a half-mile swim. That was a 0.8, 0.85 swim, which is about 12.
Cow.
That's about 1,300, 1,400 meters, which most people
Wow.
cannot even do unbroken in a pool in CrossFit.
Mhm.
So there, you had to have had a lot of fight or flight.
Well, look, and
going
I
on.
spoke with athletes last year when there was a little bit of controversy surrounding the 5K run, and people said, "Hey, I'm pacing this race for a 5K run. Like I know that at this point I can pick it up." And if you watch, I don't know, the Olympics, regardless of the discipline, there's athletes that are really good at taking it out, and
Yeah.
there's athletes that are really good at bringing it home. But in all of those cases, they're making a plan based around an advertised, a known distance.
Yep.
In CrossFit, when it comes to running and swimming events forever, we've pretty much always said it's about this distance. Unless it's in a pool, we've never really known the distance of swims. Unless it's on a track, we've never really known the distance of the runs. They're always about this distance. And it sounds to me like that probably needs to be fixed because
Yeah.
if
100%.
especially if you're swimming, 800 meters is a long distance for some of those people. Just finishing it is an achievement.
Oh, yeah.
If that's 30-40% more than an 800-meter swim, that's a, like, knowing that for the worst swimmers there, that might change their approach to even wanting to do it. And on the flip side, when you have the best swimmers, they're pushing, knowing, okay, it's an 800, even in my worst condition, it's going to take this much time. And if you start extending beyond that time, they're not accounting for that, because it's not like, you could say there's no way that I'm taking more than 12 minutes in any circumstance to do this distance of swimming.
Totally.
But if
Exactly.
it's not that
I paced
distance,
it for 11 to 12 minutes. I thought it was going to be a longer for 11 to 12 minutes because I'd done so many open water swims for the games. I did about 6 of them. And every 800 that I did was paced for right around then. So I was like, okay, it's for sure 11 to 12 minutes. And it took me 18:30 to get out of the water.
Speaking, you mentioned Adler, and he's probably, again, one of those athletes that probably ran more than 8.8 or swam.
Yeah.
Just zigzagging. Have you heard from him at all? I mean, this is the past champ. Usually they reach out. I mean, has he reached out to you and say, "Hey, congratulations," or anything like that? Or have you heard from Laura Horvath or any of those athletes that decided not to continue?
No, I haven't. I think I don't know if they fall under the swing, but I think there's a group of athletes still that don't think this game's counted, or don't I don't know where they stand. But
Yeah.
I have had a few of the past champs, Grant Holberg specifically, reached out and was like, "Welcome to the club."
Wow.
And I was like, "This is really cool. Like, thanks, man. Like, that's really
awesome.
nice gesture." And so I think they're, I mean, I would only hope that they say that kind of thing, but I don't expect it. I don't really expect it.
You mentioned safety.
Yeah.
Was there ever someone, and Brian, you might know this too, was there ever someone identified during like one of the briefings or at the beginnings, like, this is who's in charge of athlete safety, this is who you talk to if you have any, was there anything like that brought up?
They said it's the team in general. They said our team, every time we asked who's responsible, our team is responsible.
Okay.
So I don't think they're going to put any individual, even though there may be someone in charge, I don't think they're going to put that individual on the spot or in light. There could be ideas of who it is, but
Sure.
I really do believe that the whole team had to have a consensus, as in like Boz, Dave, Don had to all be like check mark. That makes sense. So, I mean, you could look at the leadership and be like, okay, well, if you're saying it was no one's fault, it was our team. You're the leader, so technically that puts you in the
Yeah.
position, right?
Brian, do you have any knowledge of that, or would
Well,
like to
it's
touch on that?
I mean, just when you think about the history of the CrossFit Games, there is actually a pretty core group of people who have been, integrally involved with the competition for a long time. In addition to some of the people that James mentioned, there's another group of people that are have been there for years and years, decade plus. There are also obviously medical professionals and many of them are volunteers at the games, but they're medical professionals in their own life that regularly are a part of that, and that team will lean on for specific things. It's not, and I think to some degree, these are the questions that it's hard to answer right now. I mean, clearly, something went wrong this year, and there's investigations that are ongoing about that, and I'm sure that we'll have some answers about this at some point. And I personally would just rather kind of wait and see what ends up being discovered before having further conversation about it.
Totally, I agree.
Yeah.
It's an interesting one, actually, James, and I wanted to ask it in conjunction with another question that I saw come up earlier. Have you talked to any of the demo athletes about any of the events? And in particular, this is something I'm curious of because of something that Dave actually told the media, if the athletes had any insight here, if because those two workouts were lost on Thursday, if there were any tweaks to workouts that were made the rest of the weekend. And of course, the demo athletes could potentially have some insight to that. I'll tell you that when Dave briefed us on Friday morning prior to the tribute taking place, he did say that they were looking at tweaking some events to accommodate for the fact that a few were going to be missing now.
Totally. I do. So Tudor's my best friend. The whole demo team did a phenomenal job. Being ready to adjust on the fly and do more workouts than they may have wanted to that weekend in spite of everything, and just helping redesign the test. From what I heard from a few of the guys was that they barely changed anything. There was few, like the chipper originally might have been a different style of rope climb or amount of rope climbs, and that Sunday the Dickies triplet run might have been a little longer or shorter or something, but overall I think they kept the test very similar from what I am hearing. And that is, I think I talked to a few of the demo people about that. That it has been, they didn't change much. I don't think they needed to change much. I still think it was an almost perfect test with 10 events. Like it's almost good as you could get it. I mean, we squatted fast and a little bit heavy twice. We used our legs a ton. We pushed, we pulled. We did a ton of hanging that final day. So much hanging. Um, we moved odd objects. We did different time domains. I don't think they had a reason to change much.
It's also
Maybe
good from just a general understanding of when Dave Castro is in charge of the programming at the games historically, and he has said this publicly as well, that there are some workouts that he doesn't finalize until they're on site, and that he'll have the demo athletes test a few different nuances or variations. The running that you referenced as an example, I would not be surprised if he had in the back of his mind the clean 1 and clean 2, or the event 6 and 7 from a couple of years ago in 2021, where they ran out of the Coliseum and back in, knowing that to get the time cap right with the distance and something like this, I want to see that in person on the field where it's going to happen. So he could do a version of it at the ranch, but he would still need to see the final version there. Like that's very much how he operates when it comes to the games.
Totally. And I also, I think the games programming this year, like for sure had a few biases. Like they're having 30% of the tests be based around running. But you can also say like those workouts with the running in them had way different components too. Like the sandbag was a huge part of that run sprint workout. The swim was a much bigger portion than the run, and it mattered way more. The Dickies triplet, the dumbbell snatch cycling mattered just as much as how fast you ran. So like I think there's a lot of like people that be like, oh, it was a running bias and there's too much of this, too much of that. But like, was it really a running bias? Like the only time we really just ran was the mile, and that was only half of the score.
Yeah.
So yeah, I think that's my stance on
What
that.
did you, or maybe if you spoke to some of the other guys or girls about it, think about that, the way that they scored those events at Farrington Field?
I didn't like it. I thought it was two different, completely different tests. I thought that should have been 200 points. But that's my opinion, and you don't have to like my opinion. I think that a mile tests your aerobic power, and the sprint sandbag tested your pure type 2 grit and your muscular output over a very short test, and was more of an explosive event. um, so I thought they had not a lot to do with each other, but I also see what they were trying to do with combining the scores of like who can be the most well-rounded over a very short sprint and a moderate aerobic power, who's the most well-rounded. And I think that's what they were trying to showcase. But I thought they could also showcase like still give 200 points out. Um,
Well, this
yeah,
is an interesting point from Alyssa. The same winners won both. They weren't different enough. And you're looking at Tia and Ricky, who are
Ricky.
obviously the best runners that were in the competition at that point. And you can flip back to Sprint 1 and Sprint 2, where Dan Bailey won both of those. Now, they were much more similar in nuance, but also he was one of the best short distance runners, probably the best short distance runner in the field. And those were 50 points each. Would you have been more okay with 50 and 50 instead of the way that they did it?
yeah, I think that still would have been good. But like I said, I think like you scored other events that were like less time domain than the mile as 100 points. I do think you had the same guys doing well in both, because the guys who did well in the mile actually didn't have to put as much effort into their scores because they're such good runners, so then therefore they had more energy for the second part. That's why you saw them doing better, not simply because they're the best sprinter. um, if you pick out fresh the best sprinters, those guys didn't do as well as you'd think. Like Jason Hopper, one of the best sprinters out there. I think he spent more energy on the mile, so he didn't have as much to give. So I think that's what we saw out in the field.
It reminds me a little bit of the year, I think it was 2016, where they had a handstand walk and the sled and then the sprint. It was like Katrin and Tia were trading these blows back and forth. And Chris Hinshaw had spoke about, well, there's this recoverability aspect within a workout like that, where you have to rest and then work again, and the ability to move blood and get the heart rate down and all this other stuff becomes a factor. So I really like the concept of having two scored events that are close in proximity like that. Thinking back to old regionals, when they would have these like a wall ball snatch and then clean, whatever it was. But again, the scoring is always a little bit of a nuance. And that was, I kind of like, they didn't always announce it as event 6. So it never felt like it was going to be two scored events,
Totally.
But how they were going to arrive at that score was new. And so I was curious what you thought.
Totally.
James, obviously you have the title, and you deservingly have the title of Fittest on Earth. Did they announce any other like additional awards this year? Rookie of the Year, Spirit of the Games, training camps, those are all things that were what training camps was supposed to be new for this year. But any of those other awards, were they announced to you athletes at all, or do you recall anything like that?
No, they didn't announce any of that stuff. What I think is going to end up happening is that they're going to email the people who still receive these awards, and they're going to pass them out. And they're just going to do it over Instagram kind of thing. Like, hey, the Spirit of the Games this year was so-and-so. The most improved was James Sprague. The most, the Rookie of the Year, Austin Hatfield. They're gonna do that. I think that's what's gonna happen. That hasn't been conveyed, but I do think that would be, a smart, not smart move, but I think
Would you be upset if they gave most improved to Emily Rolfe?
well, can't well, don't boys and girls get it, like the man and the woman, or is it just
Nope,
one?
only one.
I mean,
They'd be like,
she
James won
worked
enough already.
she worked
Yeah,
her
exactly.
butt off, bro. She deserves
She
it too.
did. Yeah.
What was she last year? Wasn't she 12th though? So she only climbed 9
Yeah,
spots.
yeah. And on paper, it would be you. I was just
Aha, Emily, you heard that, bro?
Yeah, I haven't. I mean, look, obviously, it's a different year, but that was really impressive, and I look forward to getting a chance to tell her that at some point too.
Oh, me too. Yeah, she's incredible. Tried to invite the local PNW athletes to my wedding because they're a drive away. I was like, Brent, Emily, drive over, do it. So I'm hoping they come.
Who had your coaches pass during this?
So one of my good friends, his name's Cole Harrinan.
Okay.
Matt Torres with Brute was on Downs, and
Yeah.
Matt was still back there coaching me and
Sure.
doing a lot. But I just I needed someone that could be by my side 24/7, and so I just I made sure I had that. And he's a good buddy of mine. He worked with me at Wadapalooza. He helps manage an affiliate in Tacoma, Washington. He's very well versed in the sport of CrossFit, and I trust him a lot. So I was like, I'm gonna bring this guy back there with me.
Did he? Was this the first time that he coached you at the games, or was in your corner at the games?
Yeah. Last year at the games, we had Team Brute. We had 3 coaches for 5 athletes.
So what was his name again?
Cole Harrinan.
So Cole did he come to the athlete meeting that you that Dave called after Lazar? Okay.
Yes.
Were you able to talk to Cole about that, or that? I mean, for someone just to kind of be thrust in that role and then just have that. I mean, did you talk to him at all regarding the incident and how he felt?
Oh yeah. I consulted with my whole family. Like, it was like, what, guys, I've been praying about this a lot. I don't have a lot of clarity on where this is going to go, what's going to happen. My dad was 110% sure the game is going to be canceled. He's like, I'm booking my ticket home. And I was like, Dad, don't do that yet. Like, we don't know. There was a lot of mixed emotions in our house because we had a house of 13. All my friends, my fiance's parents, my fiance, my parents, my friends, my coach, my body worker, like we had a big group. So there was a lot of a lot of these people were first timers to the games. So they were like, what the heck is going on, kind of thing, 100%. Boys, I got 2 more minutes because I got a call at 9, but I can answer a final question or something.
Brian, you got it.
Final question goes to Brian.
Brian wants to know if he's going to get one of those jerseys from you.
Once I see that tattoo on his neck, yes. Brian ordered one of my jerseys because I ordered one of his, so he should have one.
Okay.
I do have it, and I was planning to wear it Sunday at some point, but I didn't end up sticking around.
100%. We'll get another opportunity.
No, James, that was great, man. I guess you have obviously have a huge accomplishment behind you and a huge event coming up ahead of you with your wedding. Last minute, I just want to give you a chance to talk about her and what's your future is going to look like here in the next month or 2.
Oh, thank you, man. Yeah, it's a really cool month for a lot of reasons. A lot of change, a lot of unknowns, a lot of stepping into leap of faith and new roles. I think the big thing for me is going to be protecting my time because I think there's going to be a lot of things pulling me in different directions. And that I need to remember, like, I'm going to be a husband. I need to be around. I need to be present. I'm not just a CrossFit guy. Like, that's not who I want to be. CrossFit is a beautiful part of my life that has helped me become who I am today, but it's not who I am. And so for me, it's just like, I'm going to continue building, hopefully, God willing, a dominant career in the sport. I hopefully will get this invite to Rogue, even though I'm not like in their point system, qualifying with their point system. I want to train for Rogue hard. I want to continue just getting strong, putting away the holes in my weaknesses, and filling those in. And I want to have a really just incredible wedding, celebrating something beautiful. Like, this is the second most big decision of my life. My first was to follow Christ. The second is who I'm going to marry. Like, so I'm like, man, like, this is just this is a big month with a lot of big things that you don't just have a few seconds to process them. Like, they take months and months to process. Whoa, this really just happened. Like, I won't process that I won the game still for a while. And then I'm going into this huge next thing where I'm like, I have to put all that game stuff on the back burner because I have something even bigger coming up. So that also was nice thing about the games. Like, hey, if whatever happens here, I have something way cooler coming up.
That's awesome, James.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, you said it. Your time is super valuable, and we appreciate you spending a little bit of it with us this morning.
Happy to. Thanks for having me on, gents.
Yeah. We'll see you soon.
Yes, sounds good, boys. I'll talk to you guys soon.
Take care.
Okay, bye-bye.
Just on the back of what he was talking about there, Jeff, the qualifying system for Rogue was announced earlier this year. I haven't really spent too much time diving into it. If Barkley's still watching, he may be able to offer some insight, but it would be they have a different way of kind of tracking and keeping track of the athletes who they think are having not just great performances at the CrossFit Games, but throughout the competitive season over a couple of years. And James, I think, is just referencing the fact that because he hasn't competed at Rogue before, he doesn't have podium finishes at some other events, that he probably doesn't have enough to be in whatever the top, I think, 10 or 15 that they require would be, despite winning the games. But I think that they'll invite him.
Yeah. I mean, how do you not to? We'll get back. We weren't ever off track. We were expecting someone to come on, but we'll go back to some of the questions here. I mean, some of those questions we were able to feed to James. We might be expecting one more guest, but I'm going to try to get these out before he or she jumps on. But here we go. What happened from your perspective between 7:35 and 8 o'clock a.m.? And I'm assuming they're talking about Thursday morning.
Oh, yeah. Well, I've spent a lot of time thinking about that and reflecting on it, and actually going back and checking or verifying to see if how I remember it is how it happened. One of the things that we were doing at the games this year was creating a vlog from my point of view, and so we do have a variety, some footage from that event and from that morning. And some other friends also have some footage and stuff from that morning. Some people have, saved the broadcast down. And so we've been able to kind of watch back and piece a bunch of things together. And I think upon reflecting on it, the overarching thing that really happened during that time is that those of us that were most aware of what was going on knew that something was wrong, but didn't. It's almost the same way I feel now, this much 11 days after, is that we knew something was wrong, but we didn't want to accept or believe that could happen. Especially knowing, that I was there with Luca and with Josie, and this, like, all of us had the same thought that, like, he's too good of a swimmer. There's no there's no way. And this is too high profile of an event. Like, he's with the medical team. He has to be. That's why we haven't seen him come across the finish line. And, therefore was not, when you look back and you see everything that there is to see about it, there was not an overwhelming sense of urgency in the way that there needed to be. I think that's probably the best way I can summarize that.
Yeah, it's tough. I mean, I was talking to a couple content creators, and they they deleted their stuff from there, and I understand why they did it, but at the same time, I was like, you might be reached out. Someone might reach out during this investigation to get your perspective or get that angle. So I'm just like, I don't know. I see it from their point, but at the same time, it could be something important that they're deleting.
Well, I think, look, I know, and we maybe get to a question like this. There were a lot of questions about what's coming next, whether it's for CrossFit, the CrossFit Games, potentially a different type of a season, a different organized group of people running it, etc. And to me, you have to start with asking this question that we kind of addressed earlier of how do you move forward? And if the sport is going to continue, in whatever fashion it is, the athletes need to compete. That, as James said, is their, it's not necessarily every athlete's primary way to earn money, but it might be their ticket or entry point into another way.
Like James.
To earn money, right? So for people to get back on the competition floor and then eventually to have, a championship level event, whatever it ends up being called. And also, it's an interesting conversation right now surrounding water events in general. But if we are going to eventually have water events again, I don't think there's any question about the fact that swimming is relevant to fitness in general. Then we need to learn from this. Nobody wanted this to happen. The amount of trauma that it's caused for people, I think, is probably being underappreciated on the whole. Even the people that you want to blame and you want to hate it for happening this are human beings. Like, there's no chance that they're not grieving and feeling really bad and maybe an immense amount of guilt that is hard to comprehend. But it's, no matter what happens in life and how bad the situation is, we always have a choice to learn and grow from it or not. And for me, but going back and watching and observing and trying to understand how something like this could have happened is immensely valuable, to make sure that we're putting ourselves in the best possible situation for it never to happen again. And having to say that sucks, because it feels like it should never have happened to begin with. But I feel like if we don't take an opportunity to understand how it could have happened, then we're not in as good of a position as we need to be to make sure that it doesn't again.
Here we go. Will you ever work with CrossFit again?
Well, I mean, CrossFit is many things. So, like, the lifestyle of CrossFit has changed my life, as has for many people, and I intend to continue to live based on the principles that I've learned through that. As a sport, again, CrossFit exists as a sport. It's called the CrossFit Games, or the CrossFit Games season. In order to say if I'm going to participate in the Open next year, if it even happens, or the CrossFit Games season going forward from there, is going to, I don't know what it's going to look like. So it's hard to answer. In the immediate short run, there are events where people are doing CrossFit. They're called a variety of different things: throwdowns, championships, whatever. Some of them are CrossFit licensed events. And so this is something that we have been talking about, and I am planning to go back on the road and continue to cover competitions for the rest of this year, at least. Continue to tell the stories of the athletes and the competitions that are happening globally. It's what I love to do, and I think it's really powerful, because I see a link between competition and the lifestyle, and it can go either way. And so that's why I'm doing what I'm doing, and I want to continue to do that. The CrossFit licensed event thing was something that I debated, but in the immediate short run, there's 2 of the next 8 events that I'm planning to go to that are CrossFit licensed events, and they're actually the first 2 that are coming up. I've spoken with the competition organizers about this, and look, it's like a brutal situation to be in. They don't have to necessarily advertise that they are CrossFit licensed events in all their messaging and whatever if they don't want to, but that's something that they had chosen to do prior to this happening. And working at them is something that I've chosen to do, not because they're CrossFit licensed events or not. I chose to work at those competitions because of the caliber of competition they are, the caliber of humans they are that are organizing it, the conversations we've had, the business relationships that we have, and that I think they're positive aspects of the community. So later this week, I'll be back in Texas for the BCS Classic. First time going there, but it's a long-standing event. And then the following week, I'll be in Finland for the Turku Tuomiopäivä, which I worked at last year. And the week after that, I was supposed to be in Serbia for the Belgrade Games. I'm still not sure about what that is going to look like. But we do know this is Lazar's funeral service is happening in 2 days in Serbia, in the town where they live, and we will not be able to get there that quickly. I thought that there was an outside chance that it may just end up lining up with the time that I was planning to be there. And in that case, I would have gone. But to try to, I'm not even home. I haven't even gone home from the games yet. So to try to get to Serbia with less than 2 days notice does not seem possible, but we've noted the time of it, that it's happening over there. And I intend to be mindful of the fact that it's happening when it is.
Yeah. Yeah. Here we go. What are the things you allude to CrossFit doing that they were disrespectful to athletes?
I think this question is probably in reference to the video that I put up on Instagram on Saturday. Just said that I didn't want to be a part of what CrossFit was doing at the games anymore. And I had said that, like many of the athletes did, that I do think that in isolation, if you could ask him, he would say, so many have said, like, this, I would never want this situation to happen. I would want to be out there competing with you guys, of course. But if it had to be that way, yeah, I would, I think he would want people to go on. I think that he would want people to compete, and we would never know that. It's just a kind of an assumption and a feeling that people are forced to kind of ask and reconcile with without knowing. It's a challenging thing of life, is to try to do what you think someone else would have wanted you to do when you don't have a chance to ask them. And I mentioned it earlier that I just did happen to have some conversations, or have the privilege to have some conversations that gave me a point of view that I think was relatively unique for the weekend. I was also, in a position where I could make that decision. Some others had to kind of put their own personal things aside for other people. We haven't talked about it yet, but the team that we had there for B.Friendly Fitness this year was amazing. Chad Mueller rose above and beyond what I ever could have expected from him. He's a leader in his community back home. He's a father. He's a husband. He is, and all of those things are on full display this weekend, as he kind of took the lead and really was there for me when I was struggling quite a bit throughout the week. And then we had these, incredible group of content creators, Marius, David, and Renato, that were, able to soldier on and do their work. And then, of course, Jamie in the background, as you mentioned, kind of doing everything and anything for Sahara, and also for us when we needed her to. So we had a really small team, but really, really powerful. And I spoke with all of these guys about what was going on with me personally. I think, they were like a lot of people, like, they're frustrated. They didn't know everything that I necessarily knew at that time. But ultimately, I was standing on the sidelines on Saturday morning. And it just didn't feel right what was happening during the clean event. And look, that's an incredibly exciting event. There were some awesome performances there, but throughout the weekend. And if we ever do put out a vlog, I think you guys will be able to see this. Like, I was conscious of the performances the athletes were doing, but I was really having a hard time appreciating it at the same level that I normally do, because it was just sitting heavy with me what happened Thursday morning. And as the crowd was doing the wave and they were showing people dancing on the screens, doing the rodeo and everything else, I just felt like it had strayed from the kind of memorial tribute side of things into a realm of something that I felt was not in alignment with something I wanted to be a part of at that time. There's an interesting kind of dichotomy also that was existing that weekend. And I have recognized and empathized with this. If you did have the chance to go into the athlete warm-up area, it was a very different feeling down there than what was going up or out at the competition floor. On Friday, we didn't have a chance to go there, but things were still somber, especially in the morning of competition that day. By Saturday, the feeling in general in the stadium compared to amongst the athletes and coaches down below was distinct. And we did have a chance with the credentials. We had to go in there that day. And it's understandable, because a lot of the athletes and coaches knew him and knew him well. And a lot of the people who would have made up the crowd did not. And, it's, it's, to me, it's an interesting observation in light of what we've been doing, because I've made this big effort to travel internationally to try to cover CrossFit competitions internationally, with bringing more awareness to the incredible athletes and communities that are doing this same thing that we love around the world that's happening in North America. And there's been really little support in that regard from anyone in North America. No one at CrossFit, none of the written publications, none of the other podcasts have really helped bring light to those things. And there's who knows why in some cases, and in other cases, maybe it's my own fault, but for relationships that weren't perfect in the past. But I look at this guy, Lazar is a 3-time champion of Europe. He's a 3-time top 10 CrossFit Games athlete. And there still is just a huge percentage of the North American audience that really couldn't tell you anything else about the guy. And so they don't have a ton of emotional connection to him. And as you've seen on Instagram over the last 10 days, the athletes do. And a lot of them did. This is a very, very, very elite competitor, but also a very playful, challenging, by challenging, I mean bullying, interacting, giving jokes to these athletes. I think if you go and look what David Schranke put up today and the video that Josie happened to capture of this interaction with them a couple of days before the games, it's one of the best kind of just glimpses into his personality amongst the athletes. Not having him there, not being able to talk to him, thinking about how that was existing down below in the warm-up area. And in the competition floor, it wasn't. And I think it's one of the things the athletes that did continue to compete need to be acknowledged for their ability to kind of turn that off, turn on the competitive spirit, do that. And then most of them, as soon as they crossed the finish line, it was kind of right back to this heavy, emotion that was sitting with him. So that's a long-winded explanation into some of the things that I was dealing with in making that decision.
Do you think CrossFit, they saw that? I mean, and that's the reason why they ended with the award ceremony with a more somber take on it, as opposed to a celebration, because it looked like you said, from the broadcast, from everything on, you wouldn't have known outside of the athletes, and every now and then you would hear Chase or Adrian talk about, the tragedy. But after that, it would if you're a brand new person watching CrossFit, you wouldn't have known that there was a tragedy. But do you think that CrossFit realized that, and then that's when they kind of reversed direction for the award ceremony?
Maybe. I mean, I think what I mentioned earlier has to be understood is that all of those people are people. Yeah. And all of those people, I want to believe, were making the best decisions that they possibly could, given the time frame and circumstances that they were dealing with. And as we often acknowledge in these conversations, there's a lot of things that happen behind closed doors that we don't know about. These are just kind of general thoughts and observations, but it's pretty clear, and it has been communicated from their leadership team, that the financial burden of running the CrossFit as a company is real, that they have to answer to the people who own it. They have to answer to that board. They have to show on paper where the money meets the road. I know from competition organizers during the COVID years that there were people whose competitions got canceled the day of, a week before, 2 months before, and that the extent to which they lost money ranges from tens of thousands to hundreds of thousands of dollars. If the CrossFit Games just suddenly canceled on that day, and I'm not saying it should or shouldn't have been, I'm saying this is a variable that those people have to consider. What does that mean in terms of net total loss? What does it mean in terms of the partnerships with ESPN, in terms of the money that's already invested, in terms of refunding tickets to the event? It's a huge consideration that they had to weigh in. Should it even matter in light of an athlete dying? I don't know. It's easy to say no. It's hard when you're in that position to say yes. That's my feeling about it. And that's why I was okay with the competition continuing to some extent, knowing there were variables I didn't know. But the way in which they administered it seemed like a roller coaster, somber. Like you said, there was very little even understanding, or I wouldn't have really known anything had happened, and then finishing on this very somber note. Someone had asked about why the award ceremony wasn't streamed. And I think that, if I'm just being super honest, probably budget with the broadcast and not having to work overtime is probably the main answer to that. What was that question, PC?
You answered it.
Oh.
Do you feel that CF continuing with GANs, nothing had happened? You answered that. Um, I think you can answer it, but I can also answer this one as well. From my perspective, why did you say you wouldn't cover the games, but then continue posting pictures of the events? Go ahead, Brian. You start with what was your thinking, and I'll finish that up.
Patrick and I spoke about this, and I had basically told him, and I also spoke to the team, and maybe I didn't finish this thought earlier, that I was going to step away for the rest of the weekend, but B.Friendly Fitness would continue to put out specific things based on the conversations that Patrick, Chad, and I had that we felt were appropriate. And so Patrick runs the B.Friendly Fitness account 95% of the time anyway. And so I know that my name is on it, but I was not, the only capacity with which I was involved was giving my kind of direction in that conversation about the fact that we're going to post little to no stuff about results and competition, but we will continue to capture, document, and in some cases display things that are happening there, but lean more on the side of the emotion and the heaviness of the situation than on the results.
Yeah, I think, I've had a lot of experience doing social media. And with Be Friendly, I think the one thing I always wanted to do, and Brian always wanted to do, is like, we wanted to tell the athletes stories. And when you have a tragedy like that, it's easy just to kind of go, just tell a story about, the tragedy, or talk about the sport. But I wanted to talk about the other athletes. There was information that athletes were putting out there that was getting lost because either people didn't like what the athletes were doing, with whether they stepped away, or they're just concentrated in the results and the sport itself. And I felt like, in talking to Brian, I felt like, that's when some of these athletes like Moritz, Jacqueline, Ariel, they started putting things out there, but it wasn't being reposted anywhere. And so it ended up being more about reposting than it was about putting content, which, me and Brian talked about this too. It's kind of a shame, but because we had 3 amazing content creators, probably some of the best, most respected in the game. And, but we talked to them too. And they're there with us. In the coming days, you'll probably see us. We might unveil, might put out some stuff. We've kind of started doing that a little bit, but I think that's just more to kind of showcase that these content creators that we had working with us, how talented they were. And it shows in their pictures, like the ones we put up honoring Lazar. And we want to continue on doing that. But, that was kind of the decision when it came to that. Brian gave me some direction and trusted me on just following up on that. And that's where we've kind of gone the last 10 days with that too. Not as much content, but more like reposting. And I think we've gotten tons of messages and DMs, people thanking us for doing that, because it's helped them. It's also showcased. If you look at the highlights, you'll notice that there's a Đukić Strong highlight. You can click on that and you can start going through all the stories. I've kind of cataloged that, and you could go through that catalog and kind of get to know a small part of what we knew about Lazar just by going through there, because you're seeing a lot of these athletes' stories, a lot of their firsthand recollections of them, and that's what I kind of wanted to do, to kind of make something for that, for people who didn't know Lazar to get to know him.
I see these comments here from Alyssa, who was there in person, and she had a different experience than me at the games, and Kelly as well, a different feel on the other side, and I was and am very aware of this, that my experience there was my experience. And I knew walking around there that everyone was having their own experience. And so kind of what we alluded to in the beginning, or I alluded to in the beginning, is that I had to make that decision for myself. And I don't, similarly to many of others who've spoken up, I don't feel badly or negatively about, people who had a different experience and made different decisions. Totally get that. That's what I needed to do. Yeah.
And everyone copes differently, and there's no wrong. I mean, yeah. How is Luca, Anya, and the family at Southern? Have they or will they be able to get the body to Serbia to honor him properly? I think, Brian, obviously the body is there. There's going to be a funeral, but can you talk about the first part of that? if you want to.
I did get to see Luca and Anya Sunday morning before leaving Fort Worth, and that's the last time that I spoke to them. I do know that they made it back to Serbia, and that the funeral is going to be on Wednesday, and will be in their hometown there. So, not a ton of updates on that front, but I wanted to include this in our conversation today because, again, I think that this was probably the topic that was asked about the second most of how are they doing, and that's again echoing this kind of community that we have of just being there for each other.
Yeah. Where was it? Oh, here we go. What can the community do to support the family, facilitate change? Well, if you kind of notice, this has been something that, first off to the Fit Aid, they started this GoFundMe, and as you can see, it's over $500,000 right now. It superseded the goal immediately. So that is what the community has done to support the family. There's also Mayhem has also done their own fundraiser as well. And if you go, and both of these are in the description, show description. Links are there for both of them. And we'll plan on keep on pushing these. Either one of those will be fine. To support them. And then there's other things. I know GoRuck is still selling. They might be, I think it's past replica jerseys of Lazar. If you notice, they're a company that was really close to Lazar and Luca, Perform Athletics. They're selling a shirt as well, where all the proceeds are going to Luca as well. So, yeah. Yeah.
I did get a chance to speak with Don Fall this week. He's been kind of doing his due diligence to have conversations as much as possible. And I asked him, how can we help? How can we be supportive in this challenging time, whatever? And he just said he really wants to try to understand what's happening, what's going on. He's trying to get a grasp on the situation as best as he can. And man, I can't even imagine how hard it is to make decisions that he has to make. But when it comes to, people in general, if you're thinking about how to facilitate change, it kind of goes back to our conversation and decisions that Patrick and I have made for B.Friendly Fitness with regards to CrossFit licensed events. And obviously we've seen a few people who have de-affiliated or dropped the licensing. And I think that, in the grand scheme of things, in a situation like this, you're always going to see things on both ends. You'll have people that will stay with CrossFit to the bitter end, no matter what that means. You'll have people that will abandon ship because they've had enough. But I think for a majority of the people, it would be prudent to be somewhat patient, wait and see, unless you have an immediate need to make a decision. There's certainly things that we're going to be learning in the next month or two that will, I think, help people understand what maybe is the best path forward for them or their community or their gym or their event. But in the meantime, asking questions. I don't think that it's inappropriate to write to CrossFit, whether it's their support desk or if you know how to contact any of those people individually. I shared with Don the nature of the questions that you guys had asked us, just for him to kind of understand what people want to know. Where are the majority of the curiosity lying, and what are the balance between kind of accusations and questioning. It's not obvious what to do, but I think in terms of supporting the family, PC laid it out there for you guys. And in terms of facilitating change, ask questions. Don't be afraid to reach out to CrossFit. You might think that it goes unnoticed, and maybe it does, but at least it's giving them an opportunity there. And then I think that there's one other really, really, really critical component of what this thing looks like going forward. And some people have made reference to it in different ways in the chat, but it's the Athletes Association, or the PFAA.
Mm-hmm.
This thing has been in existence for a few years now, 3 or 4 years. And I don't think it's necessarily gotten the level of respect that it deserves from all of the athletes, from the community, from the organizing governing body of the sport. And I think that that needs to change. I think that if we just look at every other successful sport that's been around for a long time, there is some kind of athletes organization that has a means to interact with the people who run their sport, whether it's expressing concern, the ability to, meaningfully sit out of competition, to be, they may have representatives that can sit in on decision-making meetings. And I think that exactly how that's going to happen is still yet to be determined, but I think that it's time for that to happen.
Yeah. And I think it has. I mean, I don't know exact numbers of the PFA prior to the games, but the 39,000 followers, it's a huge jump from where they were at before the games. So that shows that people have been paying attention. They're following, and I think that's one way to support. Follow them and message them. Maybe message the PFA, send them a DM. We know the people at the PFA really well. It's just not Brent Fikowski. He's got non-professional athletes. He's got some people on the board, the CEO of that board that's looking for, that'll listen to you. So send them a DM. Ask how you can help out. Yeah. Will Luka compete in CrossFit again?
I don't know. I mean, it's a speculation, but I've been, overall, I was really impressed with the way that Luka dealt with and has dealt with so far this, impossible situation for him. I think that, personally, I kind of hope so that he continues to compete in some capacity. Will it be in association with a CrossFit Games or whatever? I think that's going to depend on what that ends up looking like, and what kind of changes happen. But I don't think that that's unique to Luka. I think that a lot of athletes are kind of, wait to make a decision based on what CrossFit actually does and what the sport evolves into on the back end of this. And yeah, Alyssa's right. Like he probably couldn't even answer this right now. Yeah. Oh, well, we can just address this, I guess, since it showed up here. CrossFit's relationship with the PFA, do they consider them a nuisance? Can't speak to what they think or feel about, but there is an athlete council that CrossFit has, which is separate from the PFAA. And so I think that my perception of this has been that athlete council that CrossFit created was more or less telling the PFAA, we don't need you guys. We have a group of athletes that we can talk to and that they can give us a perspective that will be good enough. But if you listen to some of the athletes, this kind of a general sentiment of feeling like they're just being patted on the head and appeased anytime that they've raised concerns, that's showing up more and more frequently, and it dates back a lot longer than most people know prior to the existence of the PFAA. So however CrossFit feels about this, my opinion is it's no longer relevant. They've kind of lost their opportunity to have a say in that matter. The athletes need to unify, and that voice needs to be relevant in the conversations for the future of the sport.
I'll have to do some research, but I don't think that athlete council was around this year, because in typical years they would make announcements on who was on it, and it seems like the last couple of years they hadn't. And I'll have to do some research on that. I wouldn't be surprised if it kind of just disappeared, because I know it was a yearly thing, and
well, quite frankly, it's not necessary. Like the PFAA exists, and the PFAA maybe they need to get a little bit more clear in the organizational charts and establish a board, whether it's some competing athletes, some past athletes, some people that are not athletes that work with the organization. But that's where I think that the resources should be put, not into a separate council that exists that's underneath the umbrella of the governing sport. When there's a strike or players refusing to play in other sports, that's the players union. It's of the baseball players against the MLB. It's not the MLB saying, oh, but we have a few athletes that are on our side as well. That's not how it works.
No. Are health assessments conducted on athletes prior to participation at the CrossFit Games?
The only real, I think, account we have from this was Tim Paulson, who said no.
Yeah.
But I don't think so. I think he said the waiver gets signed and you go to compete. And I'm sure that, there are things written into the waivers for those athletes that basically say, like you do when you sign up at a CrossFit gym, like you're assuming risk. You're saying that you're healthy enough to compete. A lot of times there's an option to say, is there something that we need to know about you physically, medically, whatever. And if you fill out the waiver and sign it, then I think that probably to some extent accounts for the fact that you're taking responsibility for your health before taking the field of play. But I don't think that the athletes are showing up. In fact, I've never heard of an athlete showing up at the games and going through a physical before competing. Now, it is a relevant question, especially in the context of other sports. A lot of times we'll hear about these trades in major sports and it says like pending the physical. So we know that when, big time athletes are getting traded for tens or hundreds of millions of dollars between two organizations in a well-established sport, that they have to pass a physical before the new team is going to sign off on them. And, if that athlete, even though they're playing great and everything appears to be fine, has whatever show up on their physical, that could be a detriment or a deterrent from the trade actually going through.
Yeah, it's a little bit different with other sports too. I mean, they not only do it for like trades, they do it for free agency, signing new contracts, and whenever athletes come into camp, obviously football players when they come into the camp, everyone gets an extensive physical because last thing you want to do, and they've found athlete conditions during these physicals, stuff like that. Kind of tying in with this is did Lazar have any previously known conditions that could have contributed? References to the Burj Khalifa and the Capitol event.
Yeah, it's not it's not that easy of a thing to talk about, and definitely not something that we can answer. But if you're able to just look at the facts on paper and those two events specifically, plus event one at the games this year, all three of those events are events that lasted 30 to 40 minutes. And that somewhere after the 30-minute mark, he was experiencing a really difficult time with the workout under unusual heat circumstances. The Burj Khalifa Patrick knows this, there was no windows, there was no airflow in there. And they were there for, that amount of time. Clearly the Capitol was a long and hot event ending with the hardest implement. And we saw that failing effort from him right at the finish line. And everyone is, I think, well aware of the fact that as James said, the water was not comfortable. It was warm. It was hot. This workout pushed into that time domain. So I understand this question. I've asked this question myself, but I have no way to really offer any more than just what I know from what I've seen in competition. There's no medical stuff that I know about in this regard.
Let's see what else I got here. Here we go. Can CrossFit ever recover from this? Can they possibly make amends?
I think that there's a distinction here between CrossFit as a company and CrossFit as a sport. I don't even know which one's easier to answer. I mean, look, there's the possibility that massive lawsuits come against CrossFit that sink them as a company. Like that, I think that is a realistic possibility. How likely is it? I have no idea. As far as the sport goes, if the sport is going to remain under the umbrella of CrossFit, it probably needs a facelift, a drastic overhaul, a cleaning of house, and a new structure, not just new personnel. If it's going to exist outside of the name of CrossFit as an independent entity that creates a separate season or sport or whatever, I think that's also a realistic possibility. I don't know necessarily what that would look like. In terms of making amends, that's kind of a separate conversation. And this, I would probably point back to the company as a whole because the sport is a part of the company. And I don't know. I mean, I think that they can try. I think there's some things they can do, but I think in a lot of cases, the damage has already been done and has been pretty deep. And not just with, what ended up happening to Lazar, but some of the things that happened after that weren't really necessarily kindly received. I think that the service they did on Friday was generally a letdown. And I think there was a big opportunity there that was missed. And I think just, I know there's some questions. I don't know if you're planning to bring them up or not that have to do with, why haven't we seen anyone really from CrossFit speak about this? Why have there been no firings or resignings? All of these types of questions, which I think are somewhat maybe bound by legal advice, is why we're not getting them. But I like to, from a more broad perspective, or like spiritual and worldly perspective, kind of think that there's always an opportunity to redeem yourself. There's always an opportunity to try to make things right. Every one of us makes mistakes. Every one of us has regrets, things that we wish that we could have done differently. And then it's a matter of like, okay, well, what is the course forward from here? But sometimes you don't know this until a week, a month, a year, or 10 years down the line. So I don't want to close the door on that, but I do think that to some extent it's hard.
Show. Does it even make sense to have CrossFit Games, or is there possibly a better system?
Yeah, I think we've referenced this a little bit. I do think that I do think that there's a good chance that we'll see a different system evolve out of this. I mean, not only was Dave referring to the fact that there could be a very different season within the context of the CrossFit Games season next year, but people have been having these conversations for a long time about some kind of system that replicates other types of sports, clearly understanding that we don't have a sport where athletes can compete 15 times a year and then have a championship event. But if we could devise some sort of season that gives them a chance to compete 3 times a year, culminating in a championship event as a fourth, and lean into some of the pre-existing competitions and competition organizers in that regard, I do think there's probably a better system than what we currently have with the game season. Yeah.
Let's see. Why was the competition in Texas in August to begin with? Will the games be there again next year?
Yeah. Why were the games in Texas? I would say kind of potentially a couple of things. Maybe it really was a stale opportunity, stale kind of environment for hosting the games in Madison. Could potentially have had something with Dave coming back and kind of driving that, hey, let's go in a new direction, and he can leave a footprint there in a new year in a new place. Could also be financially, relevant, which clearly we know there are a lot of decisions that have been made this year are with finances at the forefront and being in mind, and being able to go for Don to go back to the board and tell them, hey, look at this on paper. And the heat, it's interesting. Like the heat was definitely a concern, but then we also see instances of people talking about not necessarily being that concerned, that you could have workouts in the mornings or the evenings that are appropriate. I don't think that the temperature of the workout in the morning was necessarily the problem. And it wasn't a problem at Farrington Field in the night, but the water was too hot. That's the general takeaway that I have. I didn't get in the water. I'm kind of wish that I had got in the water, but that's the general takeaway from all the athletes that I've spoken to, from the account we got from James earlier, from some of the stuff that I know from speaking to athletes that morning, some of the things that athletes have posted since then. And will they be there again next year? I kind of hope not either. Also, just from the fact that I don't really want to go back there. Okay, it's a negative attachment to that place now. So I'm with AHA on that one.
Yeah. Why hasn't CrossFit released a real tribute to one of their best and most personable athletes?
Yeah, I mean, I think that if someone from CrossFit could have an opportunity to talk about this or wanted to, they would say, we did do a service on Friday morning before starting competition, and we did our award ceremony in a way that was dramatically different from anything we've done in the past, with him at the forefront of it. There was no podium there. All the athletes got a chance to come out and do that, pay their respects. But there's definitely this sentiment that exists, that that those things were lacking relative to what was maybe deserved or wanted from a lot of people. There are some, internal things that I think happened that negated having the type of a tribute that they wanted to have. I don't think that they were justified. I think they should have done a better job with that, a more thorough job. Something, look, we were, before the service that we did on Sunday at the lake, we were talking amongst some content creators like, hey, could we put something together as a little video tribute, like someone was mentioning here, that they didn't show any sort of video tribute, Courtney.
Yeah.
But then we found that one online, Maximilian from Europe, and he had made this thing pretty quickly that was great. And like CrossFit clearly has content creators and editors on their team, and in the, you know, they could have worked overnight and made something with his highlights from the games, behind the scenes stuff, competition stuff for sure. And I think that even just a 30 or 45 minute long video like that could have added to it. The video at the closing ceremony was really nice. Not sure if it's been posted. And then,
Yeah,
then there's
I
that.
heard the same thing.
I haven't seen it. And so no, but if it was that nice, I think that they should post it, because it could, it could definitely help maybe ease some of these sentiments that people are feeling towards them for not doing as good a job as maybe some had hoped.
Yeah. Yeah, I think we're gonna. I mean, Brian, unless there's something that was one of those questions, I think a lot of them you either hit on or just become repetitive. But if there's something there that you see that you wanted to talk about, otherwise, you know, I'll give you a second kind of look over that. Otherwise, I'll just kind of. There's two I wanted to save towards the end here. So
yeah, we can go to those.
Okay. Well, here, let me go to the start comments here. Let's finish this up. How do you feel about the heat that some athletes have taken from not saying enough or reacting differently than the community expects?
Well, I think it's pretty unfair to be critical of them, regardless of if they've spoken up in depth, if they've said nothing, if they competed or not. You know, it's pretty well understood, I think, at this point, that there's no right way to handle this. And I would say it's a pretty dangerous mentality to have, that you're going to tell somebody that you know better than them how to handle going through a situation like this.
Yeah. Veronica, I have tickets for Rogue. I was so excited, but now it will be different. I hope they can work with the PFA and the athletes will feel like doing it.
Yeah, I mean, the last part of that is probably the most interesting one to me. I think that the athletes will rally and will compete again and will be great. And the stuff that we talked about earlier with all these athletes, especially on the men's side, that have had the capacity to win big events, when we get them back in the competition arena, we're going to see something impressive, compelling, and enjoyable. And I do know that competitions are talking with the PFAA and will have likely a much stronger partnership with them going forward, which I think is going to be better for everyone involved. So I think that there's still plenty of potential for a very exciting competition in Rogue.
And could they move the season so the games are in the fall?
Definitely. In fact, we're hoping to work with the Chinese competition season that culminates in a championship that's in the fall, and they have a season basically within China that most people don't know about. It's very difficult to kind of access everything that's happening over there, but they have a series of events, qualifiers of different natures, points accumulations that culminate in a fall championship event in China. There is a chance that we'll be there covering it at the end of November this year, and that type of a season certainly could extend globally.
Yeah. And the last two questions, this will be one here. What's next for B.Friendly Fitness?
Yeah, mentioned it or touched on it at the start, but I'm going to go back out on the road. So a majority of our competition schedule looks the same. There are a few things that I'm considering tweaking, adding, taking away based on conversations that we've had and other things that have happened in the last 2 weeks. But this upcoming weekend, we'll be at the BCS Classic in Texas. We'll do a preview for it later in the week. The following week, I'll be in Finland for Turku Tuomiopäivä. Currently, I have plans to be in Serbia the week after that. Still trying to decide if I'm going to do it or not. There won't be a competition there. It's got postponed to November, understandably. And then I'll be back in the States, Lake Norman Fit Fest in North Carolina, Tier SoCal and Wadapalooza, Masters Fitness Championship in Indianapolis. And that's as far as I've gotten so far. That'll bring us up to the end of September. So we're going to be back on the road, covering competitions and doing what we love to do.
Are you guys going to Rogue? Yeah, we plan on maybe doing some split. I will definitely be there covering with B.Friendly Fitness. Hopefully, Marius, we applied for our media passes. That's the one good thing about me being in Europe is we can kind of divide and conquer some of these things, even though Brian loves coming to Europe anyways. But yeah, the plan is to do some coverage of Rogue, and then yeah, and because I'm out here, me and Brian discussed there's certain competitions here that we can kind of reach out with having someone here and me having the ability to go to some of them that Brian can't. So you might see some other coverages of some other European competitions. And of course, yes, Lynn knows me way too well. PCR, you going to Stuttgart to Con Porter's experience. Also, please make it to Dresden if you haven't been. You'll love it there. Yes, so if you've been on my own personal Con and James Newberry, they are throwing us like a 2-week seminar down in Stuttgart, Germany, which isn't too far from me, and I'll actually be in Stuttgart. So yeah, I might do some coverage, some maybe some vlogging there. That's one of the things we like to do, especially with those two guys, James and Con. But yeah, expect to see some cool stuff from us in the off season. Well, thank you. Hoping to see more of you guys in the coming months and the keep. So final question. I kind of saved this for last.
What a name, by the way, Kritika Chandrasekhar.
Yeah, and before we even go to this, well, actually, we'll do this last question, and then I'll kind of bring it up. I'll bring it up. Can you share more positive stories about Lazar?
Ooh, I actually know that there's a effort going around amongst people who did know him well and have a lot of stories to say to kind of organize these in some capacity. But I think for me, what I would encourage people to do is just take some time and look through some of those things that are showing up on Instagram, because it's coming out more and more that a lot of the athletes and coaches who spend a lot of time with him, some media personnel as well, are sharing little glimpses into this. Lazar was a beast on the competition floor, but when he said that, when I look up there and I see my alter ego, that is a good representation that you can get from almost anyone who has had a chance to interact with him apart from competition. The guy was jovial, loving. I mean, his smile is not an accident. Like, it's a reflection of his personality. But the thing that I've learned the most as a result of this that I didn't know is what an appreciation that he had for families, for kids, and for investing in other people's lives. He was not a guy that when you ran into him that he asked you, how are you doing? Just to ask, how are you doing? He genuinely wanted to know. If he was taking time to come and see you, he wanted to spend that time with you. If your kids were around, he would invest in the kids. If they're young enough to pick them up and hold them and play with them, he would. If they were older enough to run around and give them high fives and flex and carry them on he would do that kind of stuff. And every person that I've spoken to shares similar accounts of him being a very giving, compassionate, loving, kind, and fun person to be around.
The story I want to share, and Brian, you're there. Well, I don't know if you're there, but I don't know if you knew too much about it. But it was at Dubai, and it actually didn't start off positive. Lazar was having a difficult time at Dubai. I believe it was 2022 is when they had it in the Coca-Cola Arena. Wasn't his best performance, and he was getting mad, and it was that frustration showed, and he's a competitor, and it showed. And then I believe Saud and Luca kind of pulled him aside and told, kind of like calm him down. And he was very remorseful from that, because that was out of character for him. And I think every time he saw someone, he apologized to him. And his family and his family was there, I believe, at that Dubai.
They were there that year, yes.
Yeah, and I remember him specifically going to him at the finish line, mom and dad, and he apologized to both of them. He's like, "I'm sorry. I'm sorry you have to see this about me. I'm so sorry." And that's just the type of person he is. Like even at your worst, he felt bad that people saw him at his worst, because he knew he was better than that, and he was. It's like, there's certain people out there and I say this about, there's quite a few in CrossFit I will say this about, that they're the best of us. They're the people that you want your sons or daughters or siblings to be like when they grow up. And Lazar definitely was that. And that was just he took something negative that could have looked that he could have been negative upon him, and immediately turned into a positive. And I believe Luka did better than him at Dubai that year, didn't he? Yes, he did. And I think by that it became more of a celebration for Luka. Like he was proud of Luka. Now, obviously, we know that how proud of Luka was. I mean, we saw that at Lowlands. You saw it firsthand this past year. That it wasn't about him. It was about Luka and his family. It was about Anya. And that's why, like the Mayhem video. If you haven't watched that, please watch that, because you know what the best thing about that is you get to see Luka as we saw Luka, smiling, cheering, honoring Anya, honoring his friends, and I wanted to say thank you to Mayhem for that. They're the ones that have the access to that. And yeah, but yeah, I think that's all we have for questions, but I did want to say thank you. We've had a lot of people the last week. They've reached out, and I know, Brian, you've said it. They've reached out to not just us, Brian and myself, but just our whole team. We've had a lot more new people show up to our channel, subscribers. We've had more people on our Instagram, and we want to thank them for the support, and we also want to say, we appreciate that, and yeah, that's it. Thank you for that, and obviously thank you to our sponsors as always.
And just thanks for being patient with us. We know that there was an opportunity last week to come on and talk about some of these things, but for us, it was important to spend some time with ourselves, with our loved ones, getting our minds kind of clear. And hopefully we were able to answer some pretty difficult questions in some ways that were helpful. And, also keeping in mind that there's a lot of information that we still don't have and that will be coming out. And I think we're going to do what a lot of you guys said, which is, try to move forward, keep doing what we do for the reasons that we've always done it, which is to honor the athletes through competitions and to give you guys a chance to learn more about the global community that CrossFit has created through competition, affiliates, and communities.
Yeah. And we had a lot of cool, exciting things planned. Like I said, what's the future B.Friendly? A lot of it isn't possible without our sponsors, HDR CBD and Strike Movement. So thanks to them. Hopefully we have some cool things lined up with both of them, as well as some other potential sponsors as well, that just not benefits us, but it benefits the people that follow us and that follow along in our journey. So thanks a lot. We appreciate you guys listening, appreciate the comments. Brian loves doing these Q&As, and I love being a part of them. So, yeah. So, as always, be friendly, our friends.